What's going on, folks? Meteorologist Mike Linden here, back again for another live update. It is Tuesday afternoon, just after 5 o'clock, or Tuesday evening, I should say. Before we get into the latest information that we have regarding Hurricane Laura, we wanted to take you to an interview that we recorded about an hour or so ago with my radar storm chaser, Aaron Jack. He is in Louisiana and is going to be following Hurricane Laura wherever it goes and keeping us up to date with the latest images, video from the Gulf Coast. So we're going to get to that interview, but stick around because as soon as it's over, we're getting to the very latest regarding Hurricane Laura. Be sure to get your questions in. You can ask them across all of our social media platforms. We've got the chat up. We'll see that here shortly once we come back, but we've got the chat ready to roll, and we will show you and answer your questions and, again, show you the latest information. But for now, here's the interview that I shot about an hour ago with my radar storm chaser, Aaron Jack. Okay, we are here now with my radar storm chaser, Aaron Jack. Aaron, before we get started, congratulations on recently becoming a dad. I mean, that's incredibly amazing news. Everyone is good?
Oh, yeah, they're fantastic. It's been a great August because of that.
I'm sure Mom is super pleased that you went storm chasing with a newborn in the house.
Yeah, luckily we're a family of storm chasers, so she kind of understands.
Yes, that photo that you shared just a few days before the baby was born with that amazing tornado there. I mean, talk about a really cool picture to share with him one day. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So we figured that we would touch base with you. First question is, Aaron, where are you right now?
Yeah, so right now I'm in Louisiana. I'm in Sulphur, Louisiana. It's on the west. Western side of Lake Charles, Louisiana. So just about 30 miles or so off the Gulf Coast.
Okay, so what made you decide to go there necessarily? Obviously, the track has just been kind of shifting westward. It's partially in Texas now. Why did you pick where you are for your home base?
Yeah, so right now I picked this just as a starting point. I have been watching the model trends as they send the trend to the west. And, last night I stayed the night in Lake Charles, so about 15 miles or so east of here. And so now I've moved a little bit west with those trends. But I'm keeping in mind I may even have to go as far as, Houston, Galveston area tomorrow.
Right. I mean, it continues to look a lot more treacherous as it continues to shift westward, especially toward a major metropolitan area like Houston, Texas. So in order for you to do what you need to do, chasing and to stay safe, what precautions have you brought with you, or what exactly do you need to do to keep yourself safe during a potentially major hurricane on the way?
Yeah, so I like to get here a couple of days in advance, just before the hurricane arrives. There's a lot of people trying to evacuate out, and so I bring in a lot of my own supplies, food, gas, water. Enough water to be able to survive, a week or two even. And so I bring a lot of that stuff in, and now it's mainly it's a scouting expedition right now. I'm trying to figure out, watching the models to see where the storm's going to go, and then looking to see, driving around physically to say, what's the elevation look like here? That's my main concern, being here in the southwestern part of Louisiana into Texas. It's very much just swamp area through here. It's very low elevation. So I expect the flooding is going to be very bad all throughout the south part of Louisiana. So right now it's trying to hone in on where's the hurricane going to land, and where's it going to make landfall, and where can I safely intercept the eye of that hurricane at.
Now, you're an all-season storm chaser. I mean, some of your content that you've done for us that involves hurricane or tornadoes, I should say, is just totally stunning to see the images and the video that you're able to shoot. What makes a hurricane different?
The biggest difference between the hurricanes and those tornado events is that it's a long duration event. There's multiple days of this, of the lead time of the storm coming, all the preparations that are required, people boarding up, my own preparations, and then once the storm hits, that's a long duration event. It turned that tornado just the other day. 30 minutes was that whole event, and it was over. And this hurricane, it could be 30 minutes where I'm just in an eye wall, and then another 30 minutes in an eye, and then the other side of the hurricane is another 30 minutes in an eye wall. And then, there's going to be hours after that where it's still could be dangerous to be driving around and whatnot. So I say that's the biggest difference, is that duration. But also, the photogenics. These hurricanes, you're not out on open plains seeing the beautiful supercell with the tornado coming out of it. It's going to be they're wet and grungy, and it's windy, and there's lots of debris, and it's usually it's far from being photogenic.
Now, where you are, you're seeing some outer bands of what is left of Marco, right?
That's correct.
And what does it look like?
Well, it was we had a little bit of rain there about 20 minutes ago, I'd say. Very that tropical rain, the real misty type of rain, and that passed by, and now it's super sunny out. It's real humid, real warm. I could see off to my distance some CB, some cumulus towers going up there to my east. So it's definitely, you can see that there's influence from those upper level winds still churning overhead from Marco.
The calm before the storm, if you will. So with Laura already forecast to be a Category 3 from the National Hurricane Center, the possibilities to potentially see that strengthen even more. What's your plan? What does the next couple of days look like for you, especially considering, regardless of its strength, it looks likely to be making landfall. It's not a question of if, but when, and when is the million-dollar question, right? It looks like it could be late Wednesday, early Thursday. We're talking no sun to help you. So what is your plan in order to see the storm and, of course, to do so safely?
Yeah, so I'm gonna make my final decision will be sometime midday to late afternoon tomorrow, where I can safely get into the eye of that storm. So I'm gonna try to get to a spot to where if I do have to, some of these storms can wobble, and I want to try and get into the eye of that storm. So I need to make sure I'm gonna find a spot to where I can safely ride the storm out and get any kind of surge, but that it does offer abilities for me to venture out and then to potentially move east or west to get into that eye. And so I plan to have my whole route, multiple plans, and different routes that I can take before the storm ever arrives. And then once it arrives, put those plans into action. And maybe it'll end up just being that I have to stay put to where I'm at, because that's the only safe option that I have. It's a very dynamic event. There's a lot of variables to consider, and it's anytime I've made a decision, 24, 36 hours out in advance, it never comes to fruition. Usually there's some kind of change there, and I don't make that final decision of where I'll ride the storm out until those last few hours before the storm arrives.
Well, Aaron, we will be along for the ride with you. We look forward to seeing what you are able to see. And, of course, if you guys out there want to follow Aaron, just check out our social media feeds. He is everywhere. We always do our best to retweet him or share his posts on Facebook. Aaron, is there anything else that you'd like to mention before we say goodbye?
No, I would just say, make sure information's the most important thing right now. Pay attention to the My Radar weather app, where you can get those updates. You can see that track, and pay attention to local authorities if you're living in those areas. And heed those warnings. I'm already getting warnings on my phone for the surge warnings and the hurricane warnings. So heed those warnings, and then everything will be all right.
Great words from a great storm chaser. Storm chaser Aaron Jack. Thanks again, buddy.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, that's Aaron Jack. He's a rock star. I mean, he's our storm chaser, so he's going to be, again, taking you all along for the ride. I'm sure you've now noticed the chat right here. We're really excited about that. That's pulling in all of the chat from across everywhere where we are live right now, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. If you have any questions, you can see people asking the questions there. Be sure to ask them. I've got the feed up here next to me, and we will get to answering them as we go along here. Again, we are live across all of our platforms, but let's jump right into it. We've got the latest from the National Hurricane Center. Damien, let's take the My Radar app. And again, if you are watching, give Damien and Matt a shout out. They are our editors, our videographers. They wear many, many hats, and they are driving the vehicle here behind the scenes. So big shout out to them. Here's a look at the My Radar app. And you can see that we have the wind layer turned on as well as the hurricane tracker feature. One of our favorite parts about the app here is the fact that you guys can follow along at home while we are doing this. And here you can see that cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center. Remember that this doesn't necessarily mean that this is where the storm as a whole is going. This is showing us where the center of it could be going. That's very important to understand because this cone could shift a little to the west. It could even shift to the east. And that center line there is just showing you where the National Hurricane Center expects the center of the storm to go, not necessarily the storm as a whole. And you'll notice that it is expected, Laura that is, to strengthen to a Category 2 hurricane as early as tomorrow morning, continuing to strengthen as it is in the Gulf of Mexico, really not running into very many issues. We will talk about some potential bumps in the road for Laura, but as it stands, it is all systems go for this thing to really strengthen. And notice, expected to reach Category 3 status as early as Thursday morning. That is when at least the National Hurricane Center is expecting landfall. So very late Wednesday, early Thursday as to whether or not this thing is going to make land here along or close to Port Arthur there, just to the south of it. And remember, this cone has really shifted. It was about a week ago when we were looking at both Laura and Marco that this potential storm was going to work its way near Tampa, Florida. And as you can see, that's not anywhere near the cone. So it just goes to show you that just like life, tropical meteorology can really change on a dime. So Damien, let's go back to the graphics here and we will work our way through those. So we'll start with the tropical infrared imagery, which is, again, it's satellite imagery. So this is looking from space down on the surface of the Earth. And you can see the dark colors. That's representing some really tall, it's actually representing cold in terms of the temperature. These storms are getting very tall within Laura. It's starting to really become a little more symmetrical, and that is a telltale sign of strengthening. It still doesn't have that well-defined eye yet. Once you see that, you know that we are really talking here in terms of hurricane development, but we are not at the point anymore whether or not if it will make landfall in America. It will make landfall along the Gulf Coast. It's now a matter of when and where, because it looks likely to be right along that Texas-Louisiana border, and it is for that reason that the National Hurricane Center has issued hurricane warnings for the southern Louisiana coastline as well as the upper South Texas coastline. Port Arthur in that, Lake Charles, Louisiana, part of that where you saw Aaron Jajak about a couple of minutes ago. That's where he is. And there is also a hurricane watch in effect. That's that kind of pinkish color. Let me zoom in here so you can get a look at it. That's that pink color there. Otherwise, the rest of the Louisiana coastline all looks to be under a tropical storm warning. But for Port Arthur there, right on the border of Texas and Louisiana, that is indeed a hurricane warning. Now, we talked about what could be some of the bumps in the road here for Laura. And what we're looking at here is water vapor imagery. This is showing us simply the water vapor into the air. Let me grab the pointer tool so you can see this. This color here, this beige color, that's drier air. So we can see it over the top of Florida as well as right here over the top of Texas. And believe it or not, it's these upper level features that are going to steer Laura toward the Gulf Coast. So I'm sure you've heard many times meteorologists refer to ridges and troughs. Well, what we have right here over Florida is a ridge, and a ridge is an area of high pressure, and air around high pressure rotates clockwise. What we have here over Texas is a trough of low pressure, and the winds around a low rotate counterclockwise. So essentially what we have going on here, let me get rid of all of those doodles now, is we have this ridge here kind of bumping Laura to the left. Meanwhile, you have this ridge of high pressure kind of trying to push it up toward the north. So it's kind of like cogs on a machine, right? That's going to force Laura somewhere into this direction. That's why the path has changed so many times over these past couple of days. But it really just comes down to whether or not this ridge over Florida is going to continue to nudge it to the east, and that could impact where we see it go, potentially to near Galveston, Texas, where people have already begun to evacuate. The mayor of Houston as well, asking people to stay at home beginning tomorrow evening. So this is very quickly becoming a very serious event for people that live along the Gulf Coast. Now, let's take a look here at a couple of different models. Now, I'm sure you've heard many times meteorologists refer to looking at the models, whether it's the RPM, the European, the GFS. I'm sure those are names that you've heard before. And these are all essentially possible outcomes for what Laura may do, what it may become, and where it may go. Now, on top of this, you can see that blue cone. That is the cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center, and I have the center line as well. So I just want to show you how these models line up to where the meteorologists from the NHC expect Laura to go. As I've said many times, those folks are the Navy SEALs of tropical meteorology. They are the best of the best. So believe me, they are certainly on this storm morning, noon, and night. So let's put the RPM model here in motion. You can see that Laura really beginning to intensify as we get into tomorrow afternoon. The RPM showing a very well-defined eye, which is again a sign of strengthening. But don't only pay attention to the core of the storm right here. Look at these outer bands here that are going to make landfall before the storm actually does. You can see that spin, that counterclockwise. When you are looking at the quadrants of a hurricane, meaning if we divide it into 4 sections, let me just grab my tool here to be able to do that. So if we kind of split the storm like that, right here, the right front portion of the storm is where you find the strongest winds, as well as the possibility of tornadoes developing. You can almost see that here in the radar reflectivity, the strongest returns there in that purplish color. That is because that is, again, that's the worst place to be in any kind of tropical event, being that, Damien, if you want to take me on camera here for my silly demonstration here, but I think it's a great analogy. Think about it when you have a batter in the batter's box in baseball. They're getting ready to swing the bat. Well, this is, where they have the bat initially, but when they swing down and they meet the ball halfway through their swing, that's where you're generating the most force. That's essentially what's happening here with this hurricane as it swings in and makes landfall. Without getting too technical here with vorticity and the spin on the planetary level of the Earth, it's right there where you're going to find the strongest winds. Just know that. So again, as these bands come inland here from the southeast, well, again, that's where you're likely to find the potential for tornadoes. It's not uncommon for us to see tornadoes in the midst of a hurricane as well. They really can bring a lot, and it really can get messy rather quickly. So again, let's advance forward here on the RPM and look at the time there. Early Thursday morning, 1:30 in the morning, and the eye of the storm sits right off the coastline of Carolina, of Louisiana and Texas. And right there is a landfall. And look at the time there. That's very early in the morning on Thursday. And much like with tornado outbreaks, when they are covered by the cover of night, they can be the most dangerous because you can't see what is around you. This is why if you live in this portion of the United States, you really need to get your preparations done now. And gosh, look at all of that. Look at that band coming in off the coastline. That means even more rain just dumping over the top of Louisiana. Let's take a look at another model here. This is the ECMWF, or the European model. This is another option that we have here, and I just want to show you how this kind of goes along with the cone. And notice, the European is taking Laura even farther to the west of the center line, okay? We're going to continue to advance. Now, it's still within the cone of the NHC, but that center, at least on the Euro, is a little farther to the west than the line is right now. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. And for the people that live in Houston, I know you're not in the cone, but boy, are you close. That is why things can get rather hairy rather quickly here, because as Laura makes its way inland, I mean, look at that. Still maintaining an eye on the European by Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock. So even at this point, the NHC has Laura as a Category 1 hurricane, and we're talking to the east of Dallas here. Laura is not messing around here. Let's take a look at the GFS. This is another option that we have here, computer model-wise. And again, we're going to put it in motion, and I want to show you that pausing it at the same time every time here, that the GFS, another outcome here, kind of slowing things down, and that seems to suggest that the GFS is buying in on the potential for shear at this point. Shear meaning we have winds in opposite, not necessarily opposite, but different directions, and that could work to kind of work against Laura, but at this point, the water is just so warm in the Gulf of Mexico that it's going to almost be too little too late. If anything, it's really going to help it turn earlier. But at least it's interesting to see that the GFS is picking up on that. And how about that? The GFS is bang on with the NHC forecast for a landfall right there on the border of Louisiana and Texas. And finally, let's take a look at the HRRR. This is the High Resolution Rapid Refresh model. This model only goes out 16 hours. It is refreshing literally every single hour. That's why it's the high resolution rapid refresh. This is a model that you don't want to use that far out. And for any meteorologist that would be giving you a forecast like the GFS, for example, that goes out, I mean, more than a week, even not 2 weeks ahead of time. For any meteorologist that would tell you what to expect 2 weeks ahead of time, that's just silly. I mean, the weather can change within 3 days, if not sooner than that. But that's why the HRRR is a really valuable model for forecasters because of how high resolution it is, as well as the information that we can get out of it. And here you can see some pretty significant banding around Laura, a well-defined eye, and notice where it is. At the same time, we've paused every single model at 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. That eye is right on the track for the NHC, a little farther to the east than the European is buying in. And look at where this landfall goes, almost entirely over Louisiana. Very interesting to see this, as again, the HRRR has been updating every single hour. And if you were here for my live stream earlier at 11, we weren't able to get this far, which is the benefit of the HRRR. Now, because of Laura, regardless of landfall, we are likely looking at some pretty rough storm surge, possibly upwards of 7 to 11 feet. That is why almost all of the Louisiana coastline is under a storm surge warning. That is that darker kind of pink color. The purple color over Biloxi, Mississippi, New Orleans, Louisiana, that is a storm surge watch. And honestly, even if you are under that watch, you should treat it as if it is a warning. This is going to likely be a very messy event. It is better to prepare than not in this kind of circumstance. And here's a look at the potential inundation, meaning we're getting a really deeper look at what can be expected out of this event when we're looking at storm surge. I'm going to zoom in here for you and look at how far to the west, Palacios, Texas here, which we actually have a Surfline camera. Let's pull that up, Damien, before we move any farther. I just want to show you a live look at Palacios, Texas here, courtesy of our streaming partners at Surfline. We're just going to pull that up for you here. Oh, this is a WeatherStem camera here, so courtesy of our partners at WeatherStem. This is over Alex Box Stadium in East Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Can actually kind of see the LSU stadium there in the foreground of the shot there. That's Death Valley for you. Not as hot as Death Valley is on the West Coast, but either way, this is going to be a very valuable camera here as we get into the next 24 hours, likely to look a lot messier there. But let's take a look now at Palacios, Texas, courtesy, again, of our partners at Surfline. And you can see the blue skies there, but over the pretty rough water. No one out there out on the beach. Not a great place to be, at least right now. Damien, let's jump back to the graphics here. Again, you can see that potential inundation from the storm surge extends almost near to Palacios, which is west of, let me zoom out here, west of Galveston and west of Houston. So if this thing moves any more to the west, we really could be looking at impacts as far south as Corpus Christi in Texas. As of now, that is not the case, but a lot can change here within the next 24 hours. But look what happens as we get closer to the border, near Beaumont, Texas. I mean, we're talking, you see that red color there? That's greater than 9 feet of storm surge inundation. And look how far inland it goes. I mean, look at this. I mean, a lot of water getting pushed inland by this storm. Let's keep advancing to the east here. You can see Cameron, Louisiana, Lake Charles, upwards again of 9 feet. Storm surge, meaning it's water that's being pushed inland that doesn't belong there, essentially, and it's greater than 0, greater than sea level. And you can see how far to the east the inundation extends. From Amelia to New Orleans, though, that's where it's just a storm surge watch right now. But again, you should certainly treat it as if it were a warning, just being just the nature of this storm, a potential major hurricane, which is Category 3 and above, working its way toward the Gulf Coast. And look at Mississippi here. Even though that's just 1 foot, I mean, that's water that's not supposed to be there. So very important to not take this kind of situation lightly. Let's take a look now at the wind radii. This is another product from the National Hurricane Center. The red dot there are Hurricane 1 strength winds, 74 miles per hour. And I just want to show you how far those winds extend, because keep in mind, even though you may not have a landfall from the eye, those strong winds can still extend away from that eye. The orange color there are high-end tropical storm force winds, and then the yellow color is kind of lower-end tropical storm force winds. So it's once we get to that 74 mile per hour mark where you are feeling those hurricane Category 1 winds. And look at this, pausing it here early Thursday morning, 2:30 in the morning. And we're talking about a rather large swath of hurricane force winds. And remember, at this point, it is likely to be a Category 3 hurricane. So we're talking wind speeds greater than 110 miles per hour. And that's a bullseye right on top of Sabine Pass, Beaumont, and right there near Lake Charles. Very early in the morning as well. Let's continue to advance here. And look at that. I mean, by 9:30 in the morning, maintaining hurricane strength winds. Regardless of whether or not it's a Category 3 at this point, it will weaken as it works its way inland, but that still means and would indicate from the NHC that hurricane force winds are likely to extend almost all the way to Shreveport. Look at that. Let me bring this back here. And this would confirm, at least looking at this here, that Category 1 hurricane winds would work their way pretty far inland, let alone the wind field around it. Finally, let's take a look at the spaghetti models here, and this is kind of what we did already by looking at all of those different models that we did earlier, but I just want to show you where the kind of thinking is, and you can see that some of the models extend close to Houston, Texas, and that line would represent the center of the storm. So in the world of meteorology, you'd be foolish to only look at one outcome. We have so many tools at our disposal. To look at just one model and take it as the gospel would just be downright silly, really. And look at the path here from these models. Now, weakening at this point, Damien, let's go back to the My Radar app here and look at the hurricane tracker layer. And this would show here that, as we just saw before, Category 1 strength winds just to the south of Shreveport by late Thursday evening, 6 o'clock. And we're still looking at a tropical storm as far inland as Hot Springs, Arkansas. I mean, that's wild, folks. Weakening as it works its way toward the east, but still as a tropical depression there. I believe that is still over, or no, that's, gosh, it's difficult to tell. Yeah, that's right on the border there of Arkansas and Missouri at that point as a tropical depression. So we're talking weaker winds, but still a ton of rain. And that will stay that way, weakening considerably, though, as it continues to work its way eastward, but bringing a lot of rain on its way for spots like Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio. I mean, folks in Marion and Mansfield, Ohio, could be looking at some strong winds and rain along with this storm. The cone is pretty wide at that point, so still remains to be seen an exact path, but it's still worth looking at here and continuing to maintain tropical depression strength almost all the way to near Baltimore, Maryland. I mean, Laura is a very interesting storm to say the least, and look at that, making a run potentially toward Nantucket, Massachusetts, as a post-tropical storm at that point. But regardless, we zoomed in real far there. Regardless, I mean, Laura is taking in a lot of energy right now over the very, very warm Gulf of Mexico. So before we get to your questions, again, now's the time to get those questions in on the live chat. I will be answering them in just a moment, but let's take a look at the classifications of hurricanes, the differences between a 1, 2, and a 3. A Category 1 hurricane means sustained winds between 74 and 95 miles per hour. And keep in mind, that's not for the entire wind field. We're talking just for the eye, 74 to 95 miles per hour, which will produce some minor damage. We're talking tree limbs going down, any plastic lawn equipment that you have outside that could easily blow away, and the potential for power outages with those falling tree limbs and weaker trees falling over, that could last a couple of days. A Category 2 hurricane, we really start to see things ramping up considerably from 96 to near 110 miles per hour. Just really kind of multiplying the potential for damage. Any weaker roofs, this is where you could start to see some shingles coming down. I mentioned many, many times, if you have a trampoline outside, don't think that the ground, I forget what they're called, but like where you can mount it into the ground, it's pretty unreliable. It's best to take those trampolines, bring them inside, fold them up. The last thing you want is for that thing to blow away into your house, your neighbor's house. Not a fun time. And with these strong winds, could potentially mean power outages lasting upwards of about a week. And finally, a major hurricane. We're talking Cat 3 and above. This is what Laura is expected to be at landfall. Sustained winds between 111 and near 130 miles per hour. Potential power outages lasting longer than a week. And keep in mind, we're talking storm surge in some spots along the Gulf Coast here that could be upwards of near 11 feet. So let alone you losing power, it may be difficult for emergency crews to get to you if you do live along the coast. That is why you need to have your preparations done now. Have that plastic tub that's water resistant that you can put your important documents in, whether it be a marriage certificate, family photos, birth certificates. Get those into that bin. You also want to put non-perishable foods, water, and we're talking supplies to last longer than a week here, potentially. It's always better to be prepared. Make sure your car has gas, even though it's not a good idea to get in your car and try to outdrive this thing. Even though we are in the midst of a global pandemic, local officials may tell people to evacuate here. We've already seen that happen in some parts of Texas. Still remains to be seen what's going to happen here for Louisiana here in the coming days. And I talked about one of these earlier today. I can't suggest one of these enough. It looks like just a black rectangle. This is a charging block with the USB ports you can see in it there. I mean, we're living in a time where, especially with the My Radar app, right? You're going to have that on a mobile device. And if you do lose power, you're going to want to be able to charge your phone and to get important, potentially life-saving warnings to you when they mean the most, right? So be sure that you have something like this. My wife has one that's the size of a tube of lipstick. So to have one of those to keep your phone, your tablet charged, even if you lose internet connection, you may still be able to get cellular connection, and that's going to be important to, again, get those updates and to keep updated with what's going on. So Damien, let's take the two-shot there of the app and myself. If you want to bring the chat up now, I'm going to look over here at the camera here. Let me just move this iPad out of the way for a moment, and I will bring my computer close to me so I can see the chat here. Again, I hope that you are all doing well, and I hope that you are all safe. All right. So again, if you have any questions for me, get them into the chat. You can see it. It's over there now, and that's going to pull in the chat from all across all of our social media channels. So let me just zoom up here a little bit. Juliana from Webster, Texas, near NASA. What's up, Juliana? Julie in Cleveland, Texas. Terry in the Panhandle of Florida. Okay, Michael is asking, how far north do you expect the tropical moisture to reach? That's a great, I can't even speak anymore. A great question, Michael. As you saw on the track there, maintaining tropical storm status all the way into Arkansas. I mean, we're looking at some pretty heavy rains extending all the way toward, again, Kentucky and Tennessee. So if you are in that path, it is likely to be very wet for you. Stephanie asking any changes to northeastern Texas in Sulphur Springs there. Again, Stephanie, let me pull the if you want to, Damien, you have it right there, the My Radar app. You can see that a landfall anywhere near that coastline there is likely to bring some pretty significant damage as well as winds, as well as all the rain too. So if you live, Stephanie, in that part of the world, now's the time to prepare. You are running out of time. Okay, what else we got here? Cynthia in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Well, we just talked about you before, Cynthia. I mean, wild stuff that Laura could maintain some beefiness all the way up and into Arkansas. What else we have here? Chris in Alabama. I would say Roll Tide, but I think I like Auburn more, so War Eagle. Either way, shout out to the SEC. Okay, Layla is asking, what kind of wind strength can we expect Wednesday into Thursday morning? Yeah, I mean, again, Category 3 winds would be 111 to 130 miles per hour, and there has been some indication that if Laura continues to strengthen, which it may continue to do so, that it's not out of the question that we see Laura maybe get bumped up to a Category 4 hurricane. That's not the case right now, but again, it's best to prepare for any kind of situation here with this, because the Gulf of Mexico is red hot right now, up near 90 degrees. So that's the fuel that storms like this want, to just suck that water up and really get nice and tall. It really wants to stretch out, right? Roman asking, he loves my shirt. Where did I get it? I don't know, Roman. I think I saw it on a YouTube show once, and I'm like, I gotta have that. My daughter saw it this morning. She turns 3 next month. She goes, Star Wars? So I'm proud of her. We'll talk about that when she grows up, and I'm very proud of her that she was able to look at this and know what that is. Christine in northeastern Pennsylvania. I mean, you guys are under a severe thunderstorm watch, so be safe out there. Douglas asking about Ohio, and Tom asking about Indiana. Again, let me widen it out here. You can see that that path extends all the way into Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and Tennessee. So a significantly weaker storm at that point, but still a lot of rain heading your way, and that would be around Friday, Saturday of the weekend. So Christine asking, when is landfall expected? Well, it has changed a little bit, Christina, but here on the My Radar app using the hurricane tracker, there you go. It might be a little small to read there, but that is 6 a.m., at least according to the NHC, 6 a.m. early Thursday morning. So that is at least what, again, the Navy SEALs of tropical meteorology are looking at there. 6 a.m. on Thursday. Could be earlier, could be later. We will know a lot more here within the next 24 hours as Laura really begins to turn toward the Louisiana coastline. And Rick saying he hopes it doesn't come near Corpus, being Corpus Christi. And again, that's been something that local officials, regional, and emergency management officials have been discussing, being that Corpus Christi is pretty far to the south of the landfall, at least where right now it's expected to go. But any kind of shift to the west here could mean impacts for Corpus Christi, Texas. So believe me, that is something that we will continue to monitor here. Let me jump over to the Facebook comments here, or the YouTube comments. Hey, there's Sandy Rose, My Radar's #1 fan. Big shout out to Sandy Rose. And Leo living in South Houston, North Galveston, and evacuating tomorrow, hoping everyone is safe and healthy. Well, that's very, very nice of you, Leo. Again, we do hope everyone stays safe and healthy through all of this. And again, as I mentioned, the mayor of Houston tweeting out earlier this afternoon that if you do live in and around the Houston metro area, that after 6 o'clock tomorrow evening to stay at home. So the time is now and into tomorrow morning where you need to get your final preparations done. Do what you got to do to keep you and yours safe. And again, make sure you have that plastic tub with all of your important documents inside it, the non-perishable food, the water. Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson would be upset if I didn't talk about pets and animals. Don't forget about your pets and animals, not just dogs and cats. Leslie is she's like a Dr. Doolittle. She's got a ton of different animals at her house. So remember that you have food for all of your fur babies, right? At least a week, because it's going to be tough to be able to get out and get food for them. And again, they need water as well. So don't forget about the pets. And again, I have a 3-year-old daughter at home. If those of you that live along the Gulf Coast have young children, think about some activities for them to do. I mean, they may not understand what exactly is happening, and you're probably not going to be able to watch Disney Plus on on your tablet, right? So think about having coloring books, toys, just something to keep them occupied if you were to lose power for a significant amount of time. So again, something like this too, a power bank. If you do not have one of these, it may be a little tough to get for Amazon to get this to you here in a short period of time, but these are sold almost everywhere nowadays, and I cannot recommend one of these enough. You can plug USB devices into it, keep your phone charged to be able to reach emergency crews if you need to, and to get those watches, warnings, notifications from the My Radar app. So I think that about does it here for the chat. I'll leave it running here for just a moment here as I'm wrapping up. If you guys have any more questions for me, again, I hope that you all stay safe. Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson will be back later this evening with a live update to keep you in the loop. In fact, Damien, before we say goodbye, if you can bring up that weather stem camera again, let's take a look there at East Baton Rouge, again, courtesy of our partners there at WeatherStem, and shout out to Matt for making this animation. It's awesome, right? Gotta love it. So again, this is Alex Box Stadium in East Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm fairly certain that right there in the foreground is where the LSU Tigers play. Shout out to I can't even say his name. Shout out to Joe Burrow and Athens County. Go Bobcats. Anyway, here's a look at, again, East Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It is likely to be very different 24 hours from now. You can already see some storm clouds there way off in the distance, but we've still got plenty of time until this thing makes landfall. So, Damien, let's bring it back to that 2-shot here. And again, please be safe if you do live along the Gulf Coast. We will continue to keep you in the loop with the latest information as we have it, showing you all those model runs, telling you what we expect here out of things. And again, if I did not answer your question, be sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, click on that notification bell, that way you know when we go live, and of course like us on Facebook too, follow us on Twitter as well, and when we go live again later this evening with Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson, be sure to ask your questions then. Leslie she's one of those Navy SEALs when it comes to tropical meteorology. She is as good as it gets, so she will be able to answer any questions that you have in relation to anything, what she expects out of Laura, looking at models. There's so much more than what I showed you there. I just don't want to bog things down. But again, we will have the latest for you in the next update. From everyone here at My Radar, again, big shout out to Damien and Matt pulling all the strings behind the scenes. Big shout out to everyone on the team, meteorologist Stephanie Lauber, Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson. We will be taking you along the rest of the way and keeping you in the loop as Laura makes its way toward the Gulf Coast. Until then, stay safe and stay dry. We'll catch you in the next one.